Welcome to Own the Season podcast. We will talk to industry insiders along with outdoor enthusiasts to help you own your season. Now let's join hosts Art and Michelle Helen with Brad Jones. Own the Season podcast is sponsored by Griffin Armament, the oldest privately owned silencer manufacturer in the United States. Go to griffinarmament.com to learn how you can get a silencer shipped to your door. Griffin Armament, engineered silence.
Hello and welcome to Own the Season podcast. I'm Michelle Helen, along with Art Helen and Brad Jones. And today our guest is Dieter Kaboth, longtime friend of Art's. You guys go way back. Welcome, Dieter.
How's it going, you guys?
We're awesome. Thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So I've heard your name for a long time. Art has brought your name up just, periodically now and then. I think you guys go back to days of being at HS together. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got to where you are today in the out west. I think you're out west in Idaho now, avid elk hunter. But you didn't start out that way, right?
No, I actually started out right down the road from where you guys are at, probably about 15, 20 minutes in Wyoming Valley, between you and Spring Green. So I went to high school in Spring Green, Wisconsin, and moved out west, sight unseen, about 1983 is when I moved out, and never looked back. Been out here ever since.
That's a huge move. What prompted you to do that? Such a drastic change in your life.
I met a friend of mine. He was a doctor, actually. We were on vacation. We were in a bear camp up in Winchester, Wisconsin, up at Art Laha's lodge up there, bar. And Art is in the Bow Hunters Hall of Fame, by the way. Had great stories. I was so blessed to have known him. And he was pretty instrumental in bringing archery to the state of Wisconsin, actually. But I met a doctor up there, and he moved his practice out to Oregon. And and by the way, when I moved out west, they knew I was an outsider because they would say Oregon.
Right.
Guilty. You look like you're an outsider right away to those folks out there. So you got to switch it to Oregon. And so I moved out there. He kept sending me this literature. You got to come out here. You got to see this place. It's so beautiful. It's so awesome. And I moved out there. I met a gal from Belmont, Wisconsin at the time. We're not married anymore. And we were engaged, and we moved out there sight unseen. And make a long story short, we moved out there and lived out there. And I started selling pharmaceuticals. I got a job like a week after I got out there, and got a great job selling pharmaceuticals. And my territory was a small company, so my territory was the whole state of Oregon. And everybody was talking about elk hunting. Back out here, elk hunting is like opening day of elk season and happens out west. It's just like deer season when I was a kid. I mean, it was like, if you're a deer hunter, it was like Christmas. You just couldn't wait, for opening day of deer season, especially rifle season, right? And back in those days, and I'm sure it's the same way now today. But anyway, I didn't know anything about elk hunting. So I picked up a tape from Wayne Carlton back in the day, and I put this cassette tape in my car. And when I travel around to my territory, I bought some elk calls, and I tried different ones. And actually, Wayne Carlton seemed to fit me the best. And I would practice these elk sounds as I was driving in between doctors' offices from town to town, and I learned how to elk call, but I didn't know how to elk hunt. There's a big difference between elk hunting and elk calling. And I'll share that a little bit with you when we get into the podcast a little bit, the difference between it. And especially for people that are thinking about coming out west to go elk hunting for the first time.
Peter, let's talk a little bit about that. What can somebody expect if they're looking, come out west and do some elk hunting? What should they be looking for? Who should they be looking for?
Well, Art, and Michelle, when I first came out here, I had to learn how to hunt on the ground because, when I was a kid, 1972, and I'm aging myself now. I'm in my 60s now, but aging myself, tree stands really started to evolve. They had this company called Baker Tree Stands. It was like the number one tree stand company at the time.
Was that the make your own tree
huge.
stand with just like they sold the hardware and then you added your plywood?
A lot of it. Yeah.
Okay.
They had an option for that. Yes.
Yeah, they did have a kit, but
Okay.
I think people started getting tired of falling through the plywood.
Right.
Or if you'd
company
lean, remember you'd lean just wrong and the whole thing would slide down the tree on you.
Yeah.
Climbers, right? Yeah.
I'm just picturing, that predates me, but I'm picturing like one small step better than like nailing your wood to the tree directly, like yeah.
But I'm digressing a little bit, but it's fun to do that sometimes. We go down memory lane, how you started out with all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But we were hunting out of tree stands, and for the most part, except for we have some pretty good ground blinds out today, and I know people are killing some nice whitetails out of ground blinds. But back in those days, we didn't have that. We had tree stands. That's how we hunted deer. Unless you're, during rifle season, at least, during archery season at least, you would sit in a tree stand. During rifle season, I guess it doesn't matter. You just sit on the ground a lot of times and kind of wait for them because they're in the rut and they're being stupid, and you can kill a buck a little bit further away than you can with a bow. But when I moved out west, where I'm going with this, is I had to learn how to hunt all over again. I did not know how to hunt from the ground. It was a learning experience. It was a learning curve for me to learn how to hunt deer and elk on the ground, and I wasn't successful the first few. I was with deer, but when it came to elk, I wasn't successful with bow and arrow. I mean, I'd call them into 50 yards, 100 yards, but it was out of my bow range. I wouldn't take those shots. Now today, they wouldn't even think twice about it, with the equipment that they have it's efficient enough to do that. But I had to learn how to hunt on the ground. It was a big learning curve back in those days.
Yeah, it's when I first started guiding elk hunters years and years ago, I did for a few years, and you're right, it was completely different. I'd leave here in Wisconsin where, again, the old Baker, and you'd get out there, and now all of a sudden it was, wait a minute, the terrain is completely different, the winds, the thermals, you had to learn all that stuff that you didn't have to. I mean, you learned it here, but you didn't have to know it as well. You could call those elk in, but then you couldn't finish them because at the time I didn't, really understand the thermals, how they worked, the ridges and valleys there and how the winds, through the pines compared to the Quakies, compared to, the different terrain sets. It was all completely different and new. So, I think that's one thing as you look, and that I hope you get into here in a second is for people coming out there, some of those things, what are some of those things, is it using Hunt Stand? Is it using, the weather apps? What, how do you really get started in this, Dieter? I mean, you've done it for so long. I kind of quit doing it as elk hunting and, came back to, diehard whitetails. And, I'm sure things have even evolved more since I was there. So kind of, take us through that process, if you would, please.
You bet. So just to give everybody a little background on my background a little bit. So I've been fortunate enough to win 4 World Elk Calling Championships with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. So driving around and practicing when I was selling pharmaceuticals really helped me learn how to elk call really well. Listening to Wayne Carlton in those days. And we lost him about 3 months ago, by the way.
Yep.
He was like family to me. I've known him for so many years. And he was a true friend. But where I'm going with it is I was really lucky. I won those championships, but what I'm more, I guess, proud about, if you want to say that, is I've called over 200 bull elk to kill over the years, and most of it's on public land. Excuse me, Art.
Yeah.
And Michelle. But That's a great question. How do you get started? Because when I first started hunting elk, the first couple of years, I was not successful. And I wasn't successful until I hunted with somebody who was successful. 10% of the hunters out there kill 90% of the game on a consistent basis. Why? And I started digging into that. Why do some of my friends go out and kill an elk every year, where I know other people, when I used to own an archery shop while I was selling pharmaceuticals, by the way, that would come into my shop and have never killed an elk in their life, never even drew their bow back on an elk. What is the difference? Why are these other people killing elk every year and these other people aren't? And that's why I started to dissect what makes elk hunters successful. And that's what I want to share with you today. And it's learning how to call and call good it's a good thing. But there's going to be thousands of people out there. I want everybody to understand this. There's going to be thousands of people out there that are going to go out and elk hunt this fall. They're going to kill an elk. They're going to call it into a kill. And they've never entered some stupid contest, right? So you don't have to be, a world champion elk caller to call an elk. But what you have to do, what you got to do is what you were talking about, knowing how to hunt them and knowing how to work a bull. It's completely different. So how I get started is this. First of all, you want to pick your state, which state you want to go to. Let's pick Colorado, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana. It doesn't matter. Pick your state, which one you want to go to. Then what I used to do back in the day when I first started doing this is I would find out what are the best bull to cow ratios in those states. And if you can find the best bull to cow ratios, what I'm looking for is at least 20 to 30 bulls for every 100 cows. Folks, if you've only got a week to 2 weeks to go elk hunting, you've got to really go out there with a plan to put these odds in your favor. You just don't want to go walk around the woods just blindly, just thinking, well, I'm elk hunting. Hopefully I'll run into an elk and kill one. Like I think I know what I'm doing. Because you might get lucky, but more than likely you won't get lucky. So what I'm going to do is give everybody a plan right now of what to do before you go out west. And before you leave your kitchen table, I don't care if you're in Dodgeville or Platteville or Spring Green, Wisconsin, or wherever, even anywhere in the country, before you leave your kitchen table, this is the first thing I do. Find your good bull to cow ratios. Try to pin it down to the unit you want to hunt. Call a biologist for that unit. Ask them. Dwight Shue, who used to be the hunting editor for Bowhunter magazine, taught me this a long time ago and became a good friend of mine. Younger guys won't even ever heard of Dwight Shue, but to me, he was a god of an elk hunter back in my day. Dwight Shue taught me if you want to get a specific question or answer to a question, ask a specific question in the first place. If that makes sense what I'm saying.
Yep. If
you want a specific answer, ask a specific question. So what it'll do is it'll tell the biologist, for instance, I'm going to ask the biologist, okay, I'm going to hunt in Idaho. I'm going to hunt Unit 10 in Idaho, and I'm going to go hunt up Cougar Creek up in Idaho. See, I've got all the lingo. Creek. Back home we call it creek.
I got a story about that, but I don't want to digress right now.
Okay. So, but I got to hear it later on still.
Yeah, we can. Yep.
Okay. But so what I want to do is ask a biologist, hey, what do you think about Cougar Creek? And what do you think about, by asking specific questions to a biologist, you're going to get more specific answers back. If you just go to ask a biologist, hey, where am I going to go hunt? Well, out in the woods. You're going to get a general answer to that question. But what I'm specifically looking for, when I narrow it down to the state, to the unit, now I would just pull out a darn National Forest Service map. But I want to tell you something, Onyx Maps, and they're a sponsor of mine, by the way, but Onyx Maps and some of the other mapping programs out there, they're fantastic. You can have look at the woods virtually right in your lap on your computer or your phone before you even walk away from your kitchen table if that's where you're planning your hunt or your desk. But what I'm specifically looking for, and it has not changed over the years, and I don't care what state I go to, I use the same principle every single time. I am looking specifically for north-facing slopes with headwater drainages. Why is that important? because let's talk about the biology of elk and elk hunting really quick here. When the sun comes up in the east and sets in the west, the sun is closest to the equator of the earth, right? Well, that sun comes up and it's shining on those southern facing slopes all day long. Like right now where I'm at, it's 95 degrees, 96 degrees here in early June. And the sun's coming up and it's setting and it's burning those grasses off that are exposed. So where it was green a month ago, everything's beautiful and green and lush. These grasses on the southern facing slopes in every western state is starting to get brown and burned up. And those grasses that are being exposed to the sun on the southern slopes are what they're calling secondary grasses, burning a lot of the nutrients off of them. We're on the northern facing slopes, and this is why it's important for elk hunting. The northern facing slopes have got more lush grass that doesn't get the sun exposure. Each grass blade is able to come up and mature and have proper nutrients in it. Elk during the summertime, just like any other ungulate species, they've got to store as many fat reserves as possible if they're going to survive in the wintertime. I mean, it's starvation basically from late November through April. It's starvation time in the elk woods or moose, elk, deer, just about anywhere. Except here in Wisconsin, you got cornfields you can get into, but we don't have that out here. So those northern facing slopes, the grasses are going to be greener. That's where you're going to find the majority of the elk. Now, don't get me wrong. Elk are where you find them, as Wayne Carlton used to say. Stole that quote from him. Elk are where you find them. But that doesn't mean when you leave your house, if you see some elk on that southern slope, walk out of there with a plan. Find some north-facing slopes with headwater drainages. And where these creeks and cricks start to bubble out of the mountainside, it's really lush, it's really green, it's boggy, it's wet. That's where you're going to find your wallows. A lot of the bulls, their testosterone builds to their peak levels. They get really irritated. They're hot. They like to find these water holes, and get down in it to cool off because their testosterone, they're just really ready to breed these cows, and they get, hot and heavy and horny, to say it bluntly. They're ready to breed these cows, and they're all worked up. And they like to find these wallows to wallow in them. But these north-facing slopes, headwater drainages, are exactly where I focus on. And I will mark a spot in that unit, like Cougar Creek coming off of that. Hey, I'm going to mark that on. I'll get a National Forest Service map, and I'll highlight the creek drainage, and I'll mark it A. I'll find Independence Creek, for instance, and I'll mark that B. And I'll find several creeks within that unit that I'm hunting, and I'll mark that A, B, C, D. Because if nothing's going on in A, then I'm going to go to B, and nothing going on in B, I'm going to go to C and D. And so you can see what I'm saying here, right? But what I'm doing, if you think about it here for a minute, I'm walking into the woods with a plan. I'm not just walking in blindly now. I'm walking in with a plan where I'm specifically going to go elk hunt. What's nice about these mapping programs now, I mean, you can see by satellite imagery, has that been burned off? Has it been logged off? There's a lot of logging out west. I mean, is it a big, huge clear cut now where there's no trees for the elk to hide in? They're going to be out in the wide open. You got to look. You got to do your scouting beforehand, and that's the nice thing about Onyx Maps, for instance, and other mapping programs. You can see from even Google Maps. You can see from a satellite imagery, what you're getting into before you get out of there. Another thing you got to realize too, when you get out west, it's big country. How many miles can you walk back into a drainage, and if you kill an elk, because it's going to be 2-3 trips out, especially if you're by yourself. But if you got a couple guys, it's still going to be 2 trips out. Can you physically get out of that area? Physically, even if you bone them out, can you physically get out with a 60 to 80 pound pack on your back? And you can make smaller packs and take your time. But if it's hot outside, like in archery season, you got to get it out quick because you don't want the meat to spoil. So, you got to look at, if there's a lot of roads to that drainage, you got to think there's going to be a lot of people possibly that are going to be there. The further back you can get in, the more less people you run into. but can you get the elk out if you get them? You got to really take that into consideration. The meat is so good, and it's so, to me, it's so much better than deer, and you don't want to waste that. But that's what I'm specifically looking for, biologically speaking, and why I look for those areas. And just by doing that little simple step of north-facing slopes with headwater drainages, that will put the odds in your favor tremendously, especially in a unit that's got 20 to 30 bulls per 100 cows. And that's where the cows are. I mean, not only do those cows have to store the fat reserves for themselves, they got to support the calf that they're carrying inside of them for those winter months during the starvation period, right? So getting fat right now in the summertime, going into the fall, is extremely important. Some states it's legal to lay salt. And it's not that I hunt over the salt. I've never hunted over a salt lick. But if you can find a natural lick or find salt licks where you can do that legally, you'll create your own elk hunting spot because the elk will gather and go to those areas. I used to be able to do that early on. I'd just put out some salt, and I know there's elk going to be in the area because they love that mineral salt. Psyllium, that yellow salt, is even the best, but the red salt or the psyllium, the yellow stuff, they really need those nutrients. And even if I didn't even hunt over it or hunt in that area, I know I was doing the ecosystem, doing the animals good by giving them the proper nutrients that they're needing. But that's one thing that I do to get started. Go ahead, Art.
Well, and then the other thing that, plays into that whole ecosystem and the green and stuff like that is the wildfires. All of a sudden, and why people every year, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think every year people need to look at those same maps, even if they went back to that same place for so many years, pay attention to where those wildfires are and what they're doing, because that may be a downside for a couple years, but then in a couple years, you're going to have some of the most plush grasses and some of the most plush feed that there is up on that mountainside for elk.
Right. And elk are a plains animal by nature. When the white man came, started wiping out the buffalo, there were thought to have been 100 million elk in the country when Christopher Columbus, came to this country. But there were thought to have been that many elk back in those days. Who could say? But that's the estimates that I've heard working with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation over the years. But that being said, they're a plains animal by nature, but they were able to survive. So they're used to being in those wide open spaces is where I'm going with it, Art. But typically, they love those wide open. It's not that they love being in. They like the cover, believe me, especially when they're being hunted, just like any other ungulate species. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's some of the best nutrition. If you can find an old burn, but you got to find it where they're up against wood so they can go into the darker timber, to bed during the day. But they'll come out into those open areas, those burns during the during the night or early morning, late evenings kind of a thing.
Right. Well, you talked about all those numbers of elk that used to be around and stuff, and then the wolf decided to show up. So, but we won't That's a whole nother podcast. We can go for days. That is a whole
podcast, and just so you all know, I was there. I hunted this country before the release of the wolf, and I know what it was like. And to me, I got to hunt it when it was in the prime, where you could go into a drainage and get, you could get 13 bulls going, and like, which one do you want to get? Which one do you want to go after first? And it was like that every day. But when the wolves came, it not only did they kill off a lot of them. I mean, in Unit 10A in Idaho, we had approximately 20,000 head of elk. We're lucky if we got 2,500 head of elk in that unit now as we speak. And they just, same thing in Yellowstone, the ecosystem in Yellowstone. They just wiped out not completely, but they've sure done a lot of damage to the ecosystem. And a lot of people say it's natural, but you can have it. I mean, natural doesn't put food on my table when they can just go kill 24/7.
Right.
But that, like you said, that's a whole different podcast, and we should really talk about it. And one thing I do want to talk about with wolves, if you're hunting in wolf country, it's so important. And I don't have if you got a website, Art, I can send you these pictures, and Michelle, if you guys have a website, I can send you these pictures. You guys can post it up. But there's people out there, celebrities that should know better, that are telling people use the gutless method when you kill an elk. And I say that is just a bunch of malarkey, and I'll tell you why. Because I killed a moose right from where I'm standing here, probably about 40 minutes away from where I'm sitting right now. I killed a once in a lifetime moose in Idaho, and every single ounce of it went to the city dump because it had hydata disease from the wolves, because they never quarantine these wolves. And it's like I said, we need to do a podcast on wolves, but you've got to gut them out, and I'll send you pictures what to look for, or you can Google it, and it's spelled HYDATID, hydatid disease. And my moose had probably about 100 ping pong size cysts within the lungs, and it had probably about the tip of your pinky finger, probably maybe about a dozen of these cysts all over the outside of the liver. And you wouldn't know if the animal had that if you didn't gut them out. I mean, you really got to gut them out, because where there's wolves, all these ungulate species are susceptible to this, and humans can get it. If you don't cook your meat to 180 degrees, then you can absolutely get this disease.
Wow.
And feed it to your family. It's extremely important. And fish and game departments, they play it down because they don't want non-resident hunters not to go spend all their monies in these states.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for years, 80% of the department in Idaho, for instance, 80% of the funds came from non-resident hunting dollars for the state of Idaho for fish and game. Sure. And they don't want to lose. I'm not just picking on Idaho. I'm picking on every state that's got wolves now. You've got to get out your animals, and I don't want to digress too much into that. But it's really important that you gut them out.
Yeah, well, definitely.
I'll send pictures to you, Art, if you can somehow get it out to your listeners.
Yeah.
And Michelle. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could, definitely post those up. I think, one thing that's popping in my head, both with, talking about, watching your wolf or your elk population, fires, maybe it's like EHD or something like that. Like, there's reasons to just keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in that state or in that unit that you plan to hunt, and that things can change from year to year. Exactly. All of these things,
yep.
To be aware and be a well-informed, hunter, so what you're kind of getting into, and just that, things change over the years.
Well, a great point. You've got to look, and like I said, look at the Onyx maps, look at Google Maps, see if anything's changed. If you can find a buddy or a friend, if you know somebody in that area, and like I said, you could even call biologists and ask them specifically what do they think about certain drainages, and what's the bull to cow ratios and such. I mean, each state has got that information available, but you've got to ask for it.
Okay.
That's a great tip. You mentioned, Dieter, like you, despite being a very successful elk caller, that it took you a while to find success in hunting, and that one of the best things to do is to go with someone who is successful or find a mentor. What are some good avenues to locating or finding a good mentor when it comes to elk hunting?
To finding a good mentor, I moved out west. I don't know, where I grew up in Spring Green area. I mean, if you were hungry at somebody's house, you went to the refrigerator, opened the fridge, and I was too young to drink beer back in those days, pretty much. But you'd open up the fridge to get something to eat. I mean, everybody's doors were open, right? And it's still the same way back there whenever I go back home. which isn't very often anymore, but I still have friends that I stay in contact with, but just everybody's so open and nice. And when I moved out west, and not to cut anybody down, but everybody was just so secretive and, this is my spot. If they're afraid to tell any information. I really found that wall that was in front of me, trying to get information, trying to learn. But then, so that's a good question: is how do you find that mentor, without people not being open and receptive? And like I said, the only thing I can say, Michelle, is one way that I really started to learning people is, to be honest, I'd go to the bar and start buying a couple guys some beers and get some beers and some guys, and they think you're the greatest person on the planet. And I've got lifelong friends to this day that I've met back in those days. And I've learned some great hunting spots by buying some beers with a guy at a bar. But here's the thing: they might not be telling you the proper information. And Dwight Schrute taught me this a long time ago also. He said, some people aren't going to be honest with you. They're going to try to steer you away from their spot. But if you're hearing the same location from 2 or 3 different guys, you're going to know pretty much that's going to be a good spot. Guys or gals. I want to we got a lot of women hunters out there too.
Too big of a coincidence.
I'm not trying to be sexist.
No, we know. Yeah.
Saying that. Okay.
It'd be a too big of a coincidence for if they're making something up and trying to mislead you that they would tell you the same wrong place.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
But if you're hearing the same place, over and over, it's probably a good spot. What about
exactly?
What about are there any mentoring programs, or did you find do they have anything learn to hunt programs or anything through the local chapters of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation?
They don't have any mentoring. I can't think of any place that's got mentoring in regards to elk hunting or deer hunting or anything like that, other than hiring a guide. And by the way, I'm a guide also in the fall. The nice thing about hiring a guide is, they do all the work for you and you got your mentor right there but a lot of times I notice that the guides don't explain a lot, that they're not explaining. And with my clients, I always try to tell them what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. It seems to click and make sense. Mm-hmm. And everybody I hunt with said they have the time of their life. And I'm not trying to brag on that. It's just, I take pride in it. I guess I'm not to be prideful, but it just makes me feel good, that people are having a good time and they're learning. They're not just walking away with a hunt, but they're learning. But there's not a lot of people like that, like me out there that do that. I'm not saying that there's not, but I'm just saying a lot of people don't take the time to teach people like that, which is sad. But yeah, you're just going to have to, Michelle, you're going to have to dig into it. I know they've got programs for women. Candy and Randy Yao have got this outdoor women program out west, and people come from all over the country to learn how to hunt elk and deer and shoot guns and bows. And it's like a woman in the outdoor type of a weekend. Mm-hmm. And she has it in Utah, and I think she had it in Arizona one time, her place over in Oregon. But there's several programs like that out there, but I think they do one of the best jobs I've ever seen. And I can get you the information if anybody's ever interested, especially the women, to get involved with that. I know I've volunteered my time to help for several years, teach people, because I want people to be successful. So I give seminars all over the country for elk hunting, and I want people to be successful. And the stores that are having people like me come in, other seminar speakers, they're bringing these people in because, you're buying from their store. They want you to be successful. They want their customers to be successful. Understand that. They're not just having a seminar just to have people come in and buy it. They want people to come in to be successful with the products that they have bought already or possibly will buy. Yeah, it goes hand in hand. Mm-hmm. But they want you to be successful. And something to think in mind about seminars, because I've gone to so many trying to learn about elk hunting over the years, and I can bring up all the different speakers, the Glenn Berrys, the Larry D. Jones, the Dwight Schrutes, the Wayne Carltons of the world, just to name a few. And everyone has a different take on elk and elk hunting. And if you could take away a little piece of information from each different seminar and apply it to yourself, it's like when I was a wrestler in River Valley. There's a 1,000 wrestling moves, but you just got to pick the ones that you want to work with. There's no way you're going to learn them all the counter moves, the offensive moves and the counter moves. But it's nice to know. But what you want to do is find a few moves and perfect them as much as possible, so you're just great at it. And it's the same thing with elk hunting. You want to find these certain techniques that might work for you. The techniques that I'm going to share with you guys next are the techniques that work for me. They work for me. They work for me. They worked for me last year, the year before that, and for the last 35 years, these techniques have worked for me. And yeah, I've honed them in. I've gotten better and better at it. But some of these techniques I'm going to share with you, and if you want me to go into that now, I don't know how much time we have, you guys.
We got time, but
we're good.
I think before we get into that, I know.
Yeah.
A couple things, when we're done with all those techniques, kind of want to touch on some cow stuff, because I know Brad is talking about going out to possibly hunt cow elk this year. But in the meantime, I can see Michelle over here, and before she loses that complete train of thought, I need to hear the story about her creek and her creek or crick or whatever the story is. So
funny.
I got to hear that, and then we'll jump into your technique.
Well, it's not. You've been there,
Okay.
so it's funny that you say that like crick is what you use out west, and that we say creek here, because I think the story starts with us hunting in South Dakota. And being made fun of, jokingly, like we'd known these guides or outfitters for, we've known them for 24 years now, I think, maybe more, 25 years. So we can, joke around and we get along just fine. So I said crick, and I got made fun of, and because they were like, it's creek. A crick is when you've got something wrong with your neck. You got a crick in your neck. This running water over here is a creek. So then over the years, I've, done a informal, study on just asking people, like, is this a creek or a crick? What do you call it? And what many people that I've asked locally here, we've identified that we tend to say crick if we're not using it as like a specific named body of water. It's just like, there's that creek over there. I got to cross the creek. But if we're naming it a proper noun, it's Sneed Creek, Rattlesnake Creek, whatever. Then we tend to say creek, where if it's like unnamed, it's crick. So that's what we kind of came up with, maybe is like what defines when we use which pronunciation. So then, fast forward to December, when Art and we went out to see both girls, and then we came back and kind of crossed diagonally across Wyoming, and ended up in Buffalo, Wyoming, for dinner at some local bar there. And get talking to some folks, and they're talking, and they say something, and they say crick. And I was like, oh, wait. Did you said crick? So you don't say creek? Because I got, made fun of just across the border in South Dakota, So I thought it was just funny that you're like, you say crick more than creek, but I don't know that that's necessarily a thing, or is it just?
Well, I can say out west they say crick.
All right.
And,
well, west must start west of the west of South Dakota.
Yeah, or west of Nebraska, maybe. I don't know. Maybe Colorado, maybe the 13 western states. But I guess we were taught proper phonics and enunciations when we were going to school back in Wisconsin, so we can take a pride in, or we can, we can,
right?
Yeah. So we know we were taught correctly.
Yeah.
But they would differ out west out here. So it
All right.
depends
Well,
on
sounds
where you're
like
at
we'd
for
fit in just
what I
fine
say.
if we mostly said crick. Yeah.
Yeah. But when I go back to when I'm doing Bass Pro Fall Classics, back to Springfield, Missouri, or because I've given elk seminars all over the country, I'll use the word creek.
All right. Yeah. Kind of
Anyway.
blend in. Yeah.
Yeah.
When in
blend
Rome.
in.
When in Rome.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So, why don't you then, as before we jump back to the creek crick and all that fun stuff, kind of get us into some of your techniques, different things that you were going to talk about. And I think, Brad, you were still thinking about doing a cow hunt, or?
Yeah. Yep.
So, he's been talking about that. Kind of break down if there's any differences in that also. If you just drew a cow tag, what, do you hunt cows
How
different
it
than
might be
bulls?
different.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Are you hunting him with a bow, or are you hunting him with a rifle?
Rifle.
Okay, or muzzleloader? Okay. No, we'll talk about that. And what time of year? Because it depends on the time of year you're going to hunt them.
Right. I'm not 100% sure if it's going to be earlier or later, but most likely it'll be later in the year.
Okay. So right now, let's talk about elk. And then we're going to talk about, here's what I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about elk, what they're kind of doing right now. We're going to talk about early season elk hunting. We're going to talk about the calls themselves. We're going to talk about early season elk hunting. We're going to talk about, because what the elk do early season compared to what they do in the middle of the season are completely two different things. Then we're going to talk about rifle season, and they're still bugling a lot of times during the rifle season. And I'm going to talk specifically about public land hunting, just so you know, and these techniques that have worked for me over the years, and why elk do what they do during these times of year, and how to be successful during this transitional period of the rut that they go through, and then the post rut and so on. So we're going to talk about that, and hopefully that'll answer some of your questions as I go into this, Brad.
Okay.
So right now, just like whitetails, and right now the bulls right now as we speak, they're backs loaded up right now. So there's a really good book that, man, I don't know if you can get it or not, and it's going to be dated a little bit, but they talk about the biology and the psychology of elk and elk hunting, and that's the name of the book, Elk and Elk Hunting by Hart Wixom, and his name is spelled Hart, and then Wixom, Wixom, and he was out of Utah, and I think it's the best book on elk hunting that I've ever read in my life, and I learned more about elk and elk hunting from that book than any book, like I said, any information that's ever been out there. But what no book tells you and no video tells you is when you get a bull to bugle, what do you do? And I'll get into that when I get into the hunting techniques a little bit. But let's talk about elk calls really quick. I like to use a diaphragm call, and I like to use external cow calls. And there's two different reasons why. Number one, a diaphragm call, even though they're a little harder to run, for turkey calling guys, they say, well, I can turkey call, but I can bugle, but I can't bugle. But listen, to me, turkey calling is way harder for. And by the way, there was no turkeys at all when I grew up back in Wisconsin. I saw them one time on the 5:00 bus coming home from a wrestling practice. One time, I seen them one time, and that was kind of Highland. Is that right?
Yep.
Between Dodgeville and Spring Green. I can't remember all the names of the roads and stuff. But it was on Highland Road or right around that area. I'd never seen a turkey in my life. Now you got turkeys all over back there. Thank goodness for the NWTF and the efforts of all the people that have helped reintroduce turkeys. But if you can run a turkey diaphragm, you can for sure run an elk diaphragm. Way easier. Because a turkey, you're popping your tongue off all the time. I don't claim to be a great turkey caller, everybody. I'm going to tell you that right now. But with elk, you just leave your tongue on as you make the sound and just hold it. Okay? Now, as I steadily increase the pressure of my tongue, it'll go from a low tone to a high tone. That's a bugle. Just the opposite, high tone to a low tone, is a cow call. So the best way to practice this is like a siren. Get a diaphragm and put it in your mouth and practice it like a siren, because low tone to high tone is going to be your bugle. High pitch to low pitch is your cow call. So you hear that? There's your cow call. Now, let's talk. I'm just going to stick with the diaphragm here before I move into the external calls, because the sounds are going to be the same cadence. When I first started elk hunting, and I remember asking all these questions that I was telling Michelle earlier, people are real cliquish. And I was asking people questions, and I really got to thinking over the years, Michelle, people wouldn't answer the questions because a lot of times they didn't know. They didn't know the answers. And what I've learned over the years, and all my years of elk and elk hunting, is people don't even think about this. Cow elk make a couple of different, by the way, elk are the most vocal out of all of the deer species. They vocalize all year round. They vocalize with each other. Okay? But when you hear these two different, now you're going to, when you walk in the woods and you start hearing the sound, listening to this, to your interview right here, you're going to know what you're hearing. If you hear a cow call like this, that's an anxious call. I call it like it's an anxiety call. They're nervous. They're nervous about something. So it's not like a whitetail snort, like a shoo. You'll do it better than me, but it's not a whitetail snort. And by the way, the version of a whitetail snort for an elk is this. It's called a bark. And Art, am I too loud with the speaker here?
Nope, you're good.
No, the calls are good.
My level's okay? Yeah. Okay, so here's a bark. It's that high pitch, and I'm going to drop my tongue off really quick. Do you hear that? Their elk are really, really nervous, right? That's like a whitetail snort. But I'm going to tell you guys what I did in the hunting aspect of this, how to relax an elk when they do that. Because it can happen, and I've done it, and I've called in bulls, even if they've barked. But when you're hearing the short, choppy, they're nervous. And when you hear elk do that, you want to bring yourself to the same anxiety level they are. You want to do it too. Oh, you're nervous over there? I'm nervous here too. And it kind of confuses them. It's kind of weird. But after a while, you're going to hear this call. When you hear, like right now, if I walked out in springtime and watch some of the calves and elk that are having their calves right now, and they're frolicking around. But this is when an elk herd is relaxed. These are the sounds you'll hear. You notice how it's more drawn out? Yeah. Rather than short and choppy. So when you're elk hunting, it's really important to know that. And when I get into the hunting situation, I'll share with you why that's important to know that and how to use it. But for right now, I'm going to talk about the calls. So a cow call goes from a high tone to a low tone, bugle, low pitch to a high pitch, and practice it like a siren to learn how to get those different sounds. Now in the bugle, you can add some more realism to the call itself. You can growl a little bit in the beginning. And snap off your tongue at the end of it. Leave that high pitch and snap it off. Don't come down like a dinosaur or an elephant. I mean, don't do that. Chop off at the end of the high pitch. Chop off your tongue or your lip if you're using an external call that requires like a lip pressure on it. So I'll go. Now, another thing you can do during the high note is just hum or buzz like a bee. Put a diaphragm in your mouth and buzz like a bee, and this is how it's going to sound. And if you were in front of me right now, I'd raise my fingers. You could see when I'm doing it, when I'm starting to hum, but you'll hear it when I start to hum. I'm going to growl a little in the beginning. When I get into the high note, I'm going to start humming or buzzing like a bee, and that's how it's going to sound. It's a little bit more realism of the call. You heard that toward the end, and I extended it out. I don't usually bugle that long. When I've won all my world elk calling championships, everybody, they've got all these. They find it funny, all these manufacturers now. I remember one guy telling me, "Hey, you're not going to win with that call. You're not going to win with it." And it was a kid's baseball bat I bought at like a Walmart, and I cut off the end, one end, and cut off the other, and used it as an elk bugle. And I painted it with camel paint, and I won 4 world elk calling championships using that tube. I taped it onto a piece of corrugated elk bugle that I bought. It was Wayne Carlton's tube. And I just taped the end of this big bell at the end of it. Now everybody's got a baseball bat looking tube. I just find it ironic. I just was stupid back in those days. I could have capitalized on it, but I was so faithful to Wayne Carlton. I never wanted to compete against him. Everybody said I should make my own calls. But, he got me into this. He was my mentor. You talk about mentors. I was lucky enough that he opened that door for me. And I certainly never wanted to compete against somebody that I considered my friend. I wanted him to be successful. I was successful, and we were successful together in selling, Wayne Carlton calls back in those days. And he eventually sold out to Hunter Specialties that I went to go work for later on. That Art and I, that's where we met, back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, but, it was funny, real quick with Wayne, how when I was a kid, looking at wanting to get started in elk hunting and doing stuff elk hunting, it was always, Wayne, Will Primos, those, and you looked at those like, wow. And then to actually be able to work with them and become friends with them was, that was something. But, it was something that I learned because of that, that I would say 95% of all people in this industry, are all very, very good people. Just about everybody, they're very good people. They all put their pants on one leg at a time, and they're willing and want to help you. No matter what you think their stature. I mean, like Wayne was, wow, man, this guy is like a god. And then you talk to him, and he's just like us sitting here talking right now. Just wanted to help you and do things.
One of the most selfless people I've ever met in my life. He's just always so giving of himself and his information, And Will was the same way, Primos.
Yeah.
Like you are, I was blessed to know all of these people, and we're just talking about elk. I mean, then you get into the turkey realm of things, like Chris Parrish and Walter Parrott and Brenda Valentine, all these great people, ambassadors for the sport of hunting. I'm just so blessed to be friends with all these people still today.
Yeah.
I'm like you. I don't feel like I'm one of them, but here I am having an interview with you, right?
Yeah.
But I certainly don't feel like that. But if I can help anybody like you guys having this right now, you're on the air right now, so you can help the people that take the time to listen to you be successful. I mean, maybe that's just how we were raised back home. I don't know. Where I'm from and where you're from is not very far away, but maybe that's just in our DNA from the water we drank back there. I don't know, but
it's Midwest
Wayne
nice.
Was that way as well.
Yeah, it's Midwest nice. So
yeah,
but,
good analogy.
Well, and I do think like you encountered, some people who were not as giving of information, but I think it could be another thing. It might be people that are holding things, close to the vest. But I think you did kind of hit on another thing that can happen is that not everyone with knowledge or experience is a good teacher. People don't necessarily know how to teach it. And I can tell just from this brief conversation that we've had so far today that you are a good teacher, Dieter.
Thank you.
I can tell that just by what you've shared with us today so far.
Yeah, so keep teaching us there, bud.
Okay, so I'm going to move right into the cow calls here really quick, into this external cow call. Do not be afraid of it. Google my name, and you'll probably have it up, but it's Dieter and then Kaboth. I got a couple videos out there how to use these things. Do not be afraid of open-reeded cow calls. And I'll tell you why. These are my elk killers. You give me a call to call an elk in, bred cows or bulls. You give me this call right here that I'm holding in my hand right now, and I will kill an elk. You just give me one call to use. I will kill an elk with an open-reeded cow call. Let me use it for you. So it's really hard to describe if we're not doing the video, but if you guys have a website or some way I could possibly make a video, and I'll send it to you later this summer before season, and but I'll show people how to use these calls. But what you do is I just take my lips and my teeth and I just hold it down at the end of it, and I make a high pitch with it. You hear the difference in the pitch compared to the diaphragm? And you know how a box call and a turkey call sounds different than a diaphragm? The diaphragm sounds different than a slate call, and it's just whatever neurons you're going to strike in that animal's brain is what we're trying to achieve here, right? So it's like fishing. If you're out there fishing on the Wisconsin River or up at Governor Dodge State Park, and if they're not biting on a certain color or a lure, you're gonna switch lures, right? So you never know what neuron you're going to strike in that fish's brain or his eyesight to get them to bite on that lure so you can reel them in and take them home and be successful. It's the same way. I don't care if you're calling coyotes or ducks or geese or elk or deer or turkeys. You got to find out what call is striking that neuron in their brain to get them to have a reaction, not only to possibly answer you back, but to come in to that call, right? That's what we're doing. We're fishing with these sounds. Coyote hunt, we're fishing with dying rabbit sounds or chicken sounds or whatever you're going to use. But you never know what's going to strike the neuron in that coyote's brain to get them to come in. The same way with elk. So I can tell you through experience, hands down through experience, I have called in more elk with these open-reeded calls than any other call, and I'll share with you why. You hear that? That is a mature cow. Why is that important? It's extremely important because, and if you read that book I told you guys about, elk live on a hierarchy system within every herd structure, and elk are herd animals. Within every herd structure, there's calves, there's yearlings, there's mature cows, there's even more mature cows. I remember one year I was doing a seminar at the Valles Caldera Preserve in New Mexico, and it's this big crater of a volcano. And it used to be the old Baca Ranch, and he donated it to the people who run it now. And everybody can apply for it. It's $25 per try, and there's no points or anything like that. It's just many times you want to put in for it, you could possibly draw. And it's separate from the New Mexico elk hunt, by the way. If you go hunting in New Mexico, just draw. So it's something to consider down the road. Anyway, I'm sitting there, and there's 300 elk as far as I could see. There'd be just, as a matter of fact, they drove me through this ranch. I stopped counting at 100 bulls, and we didn't even go 5 miles. 100 branch antler bulls. Stop counting. I just thought I'm just kind of counting bulls, and I'm going down. This is before I do my seminar, right? So I'm at this little cabin. I'm out there. If you can envision this. It's just at the twilight of the morning, and I'm watching this huge herd of 300 elk out in the middle of this caldera, this preserve. And you can hunt these elk, by the way. I mean, when it's season. And I'm thinking to myself, I just want to see if what I'm saying to you right now is true. Elk live on a hierarchy system. There's mature cows, what they call lead cows, within each herd structure, within every little group. And I'm watching these elk as I'm thinking there's no way they're going to all go up to the same spot and go bed. They're going to break up at some point. And that's exactly what it did. I just sat there and observed. And you'd see maybe 20, 30, 40 elk all go in one group, and then 30, 40 elk go in another group, and they just all break up and dissipate, and they all go in their groups, and they all went their separate ways, and there's woods all in every direction, but they would all break up and go. And they did this every night and every morning. They would break up in the same groups, and they would go. So what I've learned over the years is those lead cows know, and elk know this through evolution, elk know to follow those lead cow sounds. Why is that important during archery season, elk season in particular? A lot of times, a calf sound, any bite and blow call you have to pinch with your teeth. It's got a rubber band. Any bite and blow call that's out there that you pinch with your teeth is a calf sound all day long, with the exception of one call. It's Glenn Berry's sleazy cow call. I don't even own one, but I know that cow call that he owns, that he makes, sounds like a mature cow, like this. Because it's an open reading. He's got this contraption over the top that makes it sound like that. All you got to do is pinch your teeth. But every other one, Elk Inc. and all the other, even Primos and Hunter Specialties and Carlton's, they even have a bite when you squeeze it with your teeth. It sounds like a calf. Every one you have to pinch with your teeth sounds like a calf. Why is that important? Well, there's calves within a herd structure, and there's cows within a herd structure. But I can tell you all day long, a bull wants to breed a cow, not a calf. That's why these open-readed calls are so important, because, Brad, you're going cow hunting,
Right.
Those cows will come to this mature cow sound. Okay, if you're cow calling, I'm not saying they're always, but I'm going to share with you when we get into hunting scenarios why that's effective during rifle season as well. But remember, these open-reeded cow calls, I'm telling you, if I'm fishing in a boat for elk, this is my number one lure that I'm going to catch an elk.
All right, question. So I just recently started switching lures when nothing's biting because of my good friend John Morton, switching out every 15 to 20 minutes because they just don't like what you're showing them, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of thinking, oh, the fish aren't biting today or there's no fish here, the mindset becomes they don't like what I'm offering or how I'm offering it, maybe. So when you're talking about calls, and you kind of got the same thing, kind of like with turkey hunting, you have a slate, a diaphragm, a box call, push button, different strikers, whatever. How often are you calling, and how long do you try a specific call before you maybe switch to a different call?
That's a great question. Let me cover one more thing really quick, Michelle, and then I'm going to move right into that topic.
Cool.
I'm just going to move it. I'm just going to say this really quick, and then I'm going to move right into that topic. I don't even know where to set my diaphragm now. I got a pile of them here, so hopefully this is a good one, hopefully. You'll hear elk do this at the end of the bugles a lot of times, or they'll just make this sound. It's called a chuckle or a grunt. It's referred to as a chuckle or a grunt or and you'll hear this a lot of times. A lot of times when you're elk hunting, you're going to hear that. I promise you'll hear it if you hear that. And how to make that sound, just before I get into that, how do you make that sound? It's like a cow call. But as soon as I get the high note, I'm going to drop off my tongue and I'm going to go at the same time. Now, if you want to get better at it, the thing you want to do is do not have to do this. This is contest stuff. But if you want to get good at it, you want to learn how to suck air in a little bit. So you're going to go. You get the point. Mm-hmm. But when you practice that, it's the hardest part to master out of all the elk sounds, right? It's the hardest part to master. Take your time, do one at a time, and then build up the coordination to get better and better at it. That's what I'd recommend, how to use that call. So hopefully that'll help you out. Okay. now we're going to go to Michelle's question, and it's going to go in hand with my hunting elk and calling elk and how I hunt elk. And that answer is going to be, that question is going to be answered right now. So during the beginning part of the season, like the beginning of September, like the elk season in Oregon, for instance, the elk season in Oregon starts the third weekend in August. And the elk certainly aren't cranked up yet, but you want to know what? Their horns are pretty much polished off at that time. I mean, they've shed their velvet, they've rubbed it all off. And when those horns are hard and they're able to shed off that velvet, they want to breed. They're ready to start breeding cows. But the cows are not necessarily coming into heat. Okay? And with that being said, it's like they're dressed for the prom, but there's no date yet. But sometimes in Mother Nature, sometimes cows come into heat in August. A month before, their cycle comes in a month before. Sometimes their first heat is in October, a month later than everybody else's. But the way Mother Nature has it, probably about 95% of them come into heat when they're supposed to, because if they come into heat a month early, which sometimes that happens, right? And these bulls are just waiting for that to create this frenzy. When that happens early season, if that what happens is that calf is going to be born a month early. Instead of June, it's going to be born April. It's going to be born in May. And it's still cold, and they're still up in their winter grounds. You know, it's still, and they're trying to work their way to the summer grounds. And sometimes the snow is deep, and sometimes those calves aren't going to make it because it's just too harsh of an environment. Likewise, if a calf is born if she's bred in October, that calf's going into the next fall a month earlier than normal calves that are born, that were bred in September. So, but it happens, okay? It's what happens. And if a cow is not bred in September, by the way, she will come into heat in October again. And if she's not bred in October, studies have shown and if you read that book, studies have shown that in being around the Elk Foundation, elk will come into heat possibly December, even into January, they've found. Not very often, but they'll come into heat later on. But getting back to, let's talk about hunting, and that answer, it's going to get answered here right now. What I do in the early season is not what I do during the peak of the rut. Greg Miller, a perfect example. You've heard of Greg Miller. I know you guys know him, Michelle and Art. So Greg, out of Bloomer, Wisconsin, he came out. He'd never been on an elk hunt, but he is a monster whitetail killing fool, right? Greg came on his very first elk hunt with me with Hunter Specialties, and we were in Oregon, that third weekend in Oregon. I got this big time celebrity with me, and what am I going to do to get him an elk? It's early season. Well, I'm going to do what I've always done, and I'm going to stick with my plan. I know where there's elk. I know where there's elk in the area. And what I do is I try to create that frenzy of that cow coming into heat a month early. There's a couple techniques I do. One technique I do, I've done my scouting. I've done my north-facing slope, the headwater drainage. I know the elk are here. So what I'll do is I'll take a couple bottles of cow and heat scent, some good quality cow and heat type scent, and I will put it on cotton balls, and I'll just hang them, or scent wicks type of products, that you can hang the scent from the trees, and I will go along a ridge, top of a ridge, and I will put this along this ridge for 300-400 yards, and I'm trying to create a good elk hunting spot, because what happens is, and Art, we were talking about this earlier, the thermals that we had to learn. Remember this, if you come out west, when the sun goes down, I'm looking at a mountain right across the lake from where I'm at right now sitting. And right where I'm sitting, I live on the side of the mountain right here. When the sun goes down, the wind currents go down. When the sun's up like it is right now, those winds are coming up off the lake right now. But when that sun drops tonight, the wind behind the house here is going to go straight down toward the lake. It's going to be just the opposite effect. So I know that scent along the top of that ridge is going to go down to the valleys and the little creek drainages where these elk are kind of bedded down in there, right? I know that the elk are going to be down in there. They're going to smell that, and they're going to work their way up to it. As a matter of fact, I used that same exact technique. I called in Greg a bull the very next day. I did that the one day before, went back there. I called in a bull. He passed it up on video with HS. That was on I don't know which HS bull elk series it was on, but I called him in a bull elk with that same technique. This is what I do. And to answer your question, Michelle, how often do I call? Great question. I will find an area early season, and I'm just planning on planting myself on the ground. Now let's pretend. Now, if I'm hunting by myself, I'll share with you what I'm going to do. But let's pretend I've got Michelle out with me right now, and we're hunting together. We've never hunted before, and we're hunting together right now. And I don't like to get the wind where I'm set up. I don't like to get the wind right directly in my face, because a lot of times early season, early September, early August, I don't know if that bull's going to come into my left or come into my right. It's just too unpredictable. But if I can get a crosswind, let's say it's going from my left to my right. I got a crosswind, a steady crosswind to my, just planning. It's hitting just imagine it hitting your cheek on the left side of your face. Okay. What I'm going to do is take my right hand out, hitting the left side of my face. I'm going to put it directly out in front of me. I'm going to move to about a 45-degree angle. I'm just trying to get you to envision this. I actually don't do this, but I want you to envision what I'm going to do here. I'm going to put my hand out directly in front of me. I'm going to move about a 45-degree angle to my right hand to my right. I'm going to put the shell in that direction, downwind, not directly downwind of me, not where my right cheek is, but kind of 45-degree angle. I'm going to put her out there about 60 to 70 yards. And a lot of my guides go, other guides, don't you want to sit right next to your hunter? Don't you? When my archery hunters come out, they're good hunters already. I don't get a lot of beginning hunters. Maybe if I had a beginning hunter, I would be closer. But I'm the caller. I can't do this and be right next to them sometimes. When I call in elk, for me, a lot of times they're coming in head on. But when I can put Michelle out there at about 50 to 60 yards downwind of me, not directly, at a 45-degree angle, that elk, when he comes in, he's gonna come around and circle me. He's gonna try to get my wind, and Michelle's gonna intercept him and kill that bull unless she chooses to pass it up. But a lot of times this time of year, they come in quiet and they come in silent. I notice when they get a lot of times when they get in tight, they get nervous and they'll go just like that, a little moan. And what I like to relate that to is like, think of a dog with his tail between his legs. He's a little bit nervous, and he's coming in. He wants to get directly downwind of me and smell me. Why? Why does he want to do that? And by the way, whitetails do the same thing. We hunt whitetails on the ground up here, and that's a whole different show that I'd like to share with you sometime. How do we hunt whitetails from the ground up in these Northwoods? But these elk, they want to see with their nose what they're getting into. If I could smell the difference between bulls of a little Raghorn 5x5 elk or a little 3x4 or whatever to a 400-inch plus bull that I've gutted out, I haven't killed one that big, but I've gutted out for people that I have called in. If I could smell the difference in the rankness of that bull on the ground compared to a little bull, so can these elk. And they want to see with their nose. Number one, it'll pinpoint exactly where this bull is at that they're hearing. And but getting back to your question, Michelle, I call every 10 minutes. And I will look at my watch, because otherwise I like calling too much and I overcall. And what I will do is I like to use early season. I call it my big bull, little bull technique. So in one direction, like to my left, I think the bull's going to come to my right where Michelle's at out here. Envision that. The wind's going left to right. I got her out 45 degrees in front of me, about 50, 60 yards. And it depends on how open the country is, how far out she goes. Because you can envision this. In one direction, I'm going to sound like a a little weenie bull, that's going to be the downwind side. The side he's going to come in, I always want to make that sound like the little bull, but the big bull is going to be on the upwind side. You can kind of, so that's on my left side, it's going to be a big bull, little bull, big bull, little bull. And I'm going to start cow calling in between, and I'm going to take you through this routine. And when I'm doing my cow calls, I will have a stick ready and start raking a tree like a bull raking a tree. And I'm going to create this frenzy. I'm going to create this excitement. I'm going to do this for like probably about 2 or 3 minutes. And then I sit and I shut up and I don't say a word. I do not make a peep. And I let that bull come in and hunt me. And I start this routine. Typically, I have my best luck at usually about like maybe, 5:30 at night. And I will sit there the whole night. And this is what I do. So in one direction, I'm going to make remember I showed you with all the voice, the humming and the growling. You're going to do that in one direction. The other direction, I'm going to go. What I'm doing right here, you can't even envision me. I'm just turning my whole body to my left, making that big sound, turning my body to the right, or if you have a grunt tube, point your direction that way, make it sound like there's 2 bulls going back and forth. And then I start my cow calls, and this is how that's going to sound. Okay? And I'm going to start cow calling, and while I'm cow calling, I'm raking a tree, and then I sit and I shut up. And by the way, the other thing I'm making elk sounds. Not only am I just doing these calls, I'm actually stomping I can do it right here and look like an idiot standing here by myself and doing it. But envisioning me stomping the ground or pick up a couple of rocks and toss them around a little bit, make it sound like there's elk moving around. Create the excitement early season when nothing's going on, make it happen. And this technique has been, as a matter of fact, I call in the biggest bulls of the season during this time because they're going through their pecking order this time of year, early season. They're still bachelored up. They got to want to kind of see who they're competing with. But I've had so many bulls and killed so many elk this first two weeks of the season before they even have their cows. This technique has been extremely, all that chuckling is making me burp. But this has been extremely successful. And by the way, one more thing I forgot to mention. When you hear an elk do this, they are actually peeing all over themselves. They're spraying their underbellies, their necks. I mean, when you try to have some rubber gloves in your pack because your hands are going to get stinky with the stuff as you're gutting them out. Just a little tip. But when they're doing that, they're peeing on themselves. And like I said, a little bull smells a lot different than a big mature bull, for instance. And that's why they're coming in downwind. And that's why Michelle's going to intercept them. She's out there 45 degrees down, not directly downwind, but just downwind for me a little bit, trying to intercept this bull that's going to try to come in and smell me downwind. That's my number one technique for hunting bulls early season. It's just so effective. Should I keep going, or you want to ask questions in between? Because I can keep going.
I don't have any questions right now. If you want to just roll into like the next season segment, or
I'm just soaking it all in.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next step now, let's go 2 weeks later. Okay. 2 weeks later, all 3 of us are on a ridge, or all 3 of us. So we've got Brad, we've got Michelle, we've got Art, Ross, and me, and we're all 4 of us, and we're standing on a ridge. And the first thing I do, it's peak of the rut. We know they're bugling, but we're not hearing anything. We got to get them cranked up a little bit. Like turkey, what do you do to get them to go? What am I going to do to get this elk to bugle? Do you know how many times people will go, nudge me, newbies? They'll nudge me and go, okay, bugle. No, I don't want to bugle. I'm going to always cow call first. And you know that lure I was talking about? These open-reeded cow calls? I do diaphragms too, but I'm telling you, probably 95% of the time they're answering this open-reeded cow call. and they will answer you just by doing that excited cow call like that. A lot of people call it an estrus whine. I just call it a cow call. People can name them wherever they want, but it seems to get the dang bulls cranked up. And boom, now we got a bull to answer us. And you know how many times I've had people nudge me and go, okay, there he is, bugle, bugle. Why? That bull's answering this cow call. And he's saying, I love you. And I'm saying, I love you. Come home with me in my pickup truck, right? And why do you want to bugle at that time? Because if you bugle in that moment, if you get a bull just to answer your cow calls, he wants that cow. And if you bugle, now I'm making sense to you guys as I'm saying this. I know it is. I bet your light bulbs are going, exactly. Why would you want him to think that you got a boyfriend that he's got to fight for in order to have you, when he can just have you the way you, by yourself, right? So kind of keep it. Let's have some common sense here, and when you're elk hunting and when you get a bull to answer you. Now let's listen. If a bull doesn't answer you, if you're not hearing them answer you, then you've got to bugle. You've got to, because the bugle's just loud. It gets out there, and my hearing is getting worse and worse every year from shooting over the years and just getting older, right? I'm having some of these young bucks sit there and go, there's one bugle. Did you hear it? And I'm not hearing them. And it's frustrating to me because, I'm relying on their hearing, and here I'm the guide, right? But if he hears it, hey, we're a team. We're hunting together, right? We're a team. We want to be successful. I'll take their fresh hearing any day, and then I'll just take the knowledge, getting in. Now, here's where a book or a video doesn't tell you. If you hear an elk bugling out there, let's say he's 400-600 yards away. Excuse my language, you guys. This is a family show, but I got to say this. Get your ass up and start going after that bull. Do not worry about noise. Elk make noise. And you don't want to break every stick in the world going to him. You want to cut that distance in half. Cow call again. See if he's cutting the distance on you. Get in there, and if he's cut, then get set up. Then I'm going to try to get the wind in my, find out which way the wind's going. I'm going to get Michelle or Art to my right, or Brad down on my right side. Because ever on that right side, if the wind's going to my left or right, it's going to get the shot. 9 out of 10 times, unless you get a stupid bull that just comes and walks down you. They come in. Their DNA tells them to do that. So cut the distance. You don't see that on video, and you don't see that read that in books, and you got to get your butt in on them. They will, and I made this mistake moving from Wisconsin, getting my first bull to answer me. I sat there and bugled at that thing thinking, well, when is it going to come in? And then I hunted with somebody the next year that killed bull every year, and he got his ass in on bulls every single time. I mean, tight, a lot tighter than what I was ever used to. But that's what he did. He just cougar, and got in tight. I was with Cameron Haynes one time. I did a seminar at a Bass Pro Fall Classic, and Cameron was there. I said, and he was sitting there listening to my seminar. I said, Cam, what would you do? He goes, well, I don't call at all. He says, I just sneak in and kill him. And everybody laughed and kind of deflated everything I just said, right? Because he just sneaks in and kills. But there's truth to what he said. A lot of truth. There's different ways to skin a cat. There's different ways to hunt elk. And that's what I'm saying. Go to different seminars and try to learn as much as you possibly can. There is no harm in getting up. If you can get your, and that's the other technique, is I'm calling this elk. Let's say I have to bugle on public land. Okay, not answering the cow calls, and I got to bugle. Now he bugles. I bugle, he bugles. I bugle again. He's moving further away. He's moving further away because he doesn't want to lose his cows. So the technique I use there is, you're nervous. I'm nervous too. I didn't think, you start moving away, and I'm going to have Art, Michelle, or Brad, whoever I'm hunting with, get in on that bull. I'm going to keep him bugling, so you just cougar in and try to kill him. But when you get in tight, if you bust some cows, you're going to have to cow call. And that open reeded call is what is the killer for me, that really closes the distance, that they come in on you. I'm going to tell you a technique now that's going to seem absolutely insane. But I've just called in too many bulls to a kill with this technique. Even myself, I've killed a couple of bulls with this technique. And I learned it. I got to give credit where credit's due. And I learned it from a friend of mine by the name of Dave Griffith from Archers Afield in Portland, Oregon, at the time. And he said Chuck Adams was going hunting with him, and he had told me this technique like the year before. And then Chuck Adams he needed a Roosevelt elk to kill his Grand Slam, and he wrote about this technique actually. I think, well, I got to try it. I thought I can't be that aggressive. I don't want to scare the elk. Okay, imagine this. Remember how I said, if you got a bull elk answered, you got to get your butt in on them? Well, if you're not bumping them every once in a while, this isn't the goal, but sometimes you bump the cows as you're moving in on the bull, and you bump the cows. In the old days, they would sit there and say, now, if you scare the elk, cow call. It'll stop them. Bull. They keep going. What you want to do is this. If you bump those cows, literally get up, chase after them a little ways, cow call. Now you got this, all right, I'm sorry. Take that back, exactly what I said. I said that wrong. I'm getting excited here. Sorry. So as you're moving in on those elk, okay, if I'm moving in, I bump the cows, they start running away. What you want to do at that point, remember all the big fancy bugling I showed you in the beginning? Don't do that. Just a little. Okay, think about this for a second. You're a bull elk. You just busted some of his cows. Watch the direction those cows are going to run, because they're going to run in the direction of the herd. Chase after them a short distance, and you got to be ready to shoot. I mean, run after them 20, 30 yards. And while you're chasing them a little bit, do that little squeal, little spike squeal, or little small bull. Like that. And you better be ready to shoot. Think about this. You're a bull elk, and his cows are running, and they're running past him. Zoom, zoom. They're running, and he hears that. What is it? You guys answer this. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? And then he hears that sound.
Cows are getting pushed by that bull.
That little bull.
Yep.
And this bull is not going to have it. He's going to come in and kick your butt. And you better be ready for the shot, because he's going to come in. Fight or flight is going to kick in at that moment. And their testosterone is built up so much. If they see you a lot of times, they'll run. But I'm telling you, I've had bulls see me. I'll tell you an instance. So I was calling in a bull for a person down to my left one time. I was in Idaho on public land. I was calling in a bull coming into my left. I had a person down to my left. I had a person down to my right. Wind currents were still coming up. It was early enough in the evening. I heard a bull behind me. Bull's coming in here. Bull's coming in down over here. And the one bull's coming in as far as I could hear him. He's answering that cow call. And all I'm doing is cow calling, by the way. And they're coming in. I heard a bull behind me. Next thing I know, 10, 15 minutes later, there's a cow next to me just behind my left shoulder. And that bull's with her. So I picked up my bow, because I'm hunting too. And she took off, and I chased after her a little ways. And I did that little spike squeal. And as I'm running, I look to my left, and there's a bull standing there looking at me. Just standing there. He's confused. I did a spike squeal again like that. I did that squeal. I pulled back my bow, and there's a stick right in his vitals. I mean, just the size of my thumb. And I thought, what are the odds, really? So I pulled back. He's about 30 yards away. I nailed that tree just dead center, right? That bull turns around, tears off. I still chased after him, did that spike squeal. Now he's about 40 yards out looking at me, just at the crest of the hill, turn and look, and he's just confused. He's hearing all this commotion, but he's not sure what he's seeing. That's why this camouflage works for you. And I pulled back my bow and got a perfect heart shot. I killed that bull. And by the way, that year we killed 3 bulls in 3 days that year. Another year, I think the year after that, we killed 2 bulls in one night. Mike Crawford, I was on with Mike. I called Mike in a bull. We'd seen these bulls up on this ridge, and there were good bulls in the morning. We glassed them, and we started working up in this bench, and I cow called them. It was so windy out that night. It was so windy, and I heard, ooh, ooh, I thought it was a crow or a raven calling way up there, and I wasn't sure. So I said, Mike, you get up this hill between me and him, and the wind's going to my right and left. And I just said, and I was in the wide open sagebrush, hunkered down. He got behind the only juniper he could get behind, about 60 yards up the hill from me. And I hit it again, and here come two bulls right over the hill on a dead run, like they're racehorses. I stopped that bull. If you ever want to stop a bull, this little trick, that little bark, like a buck snort. That's a buck snort for an elk, is that bark. So I bark like that, the bull just locks up. Mike just drilled that elk. I mean, just perfect. Mike was excited. I mean, he said, "That's the biggest bull I ever killed. I can't believe it." He's getting ready to whoop and holler. I said, "Mike, keep quiet. There's another bull right here." I went back to my pack, and we only had one rangefinder between us, this wide open sagebrush. I said, "How far is he?" He says, "I don't want to move. I don't want to move." So I guessed. I shot under this bull. He was about 40 yards. I shot him for about 30. I just shot right underneath him. But then later that night, that bull took off. So we got 3 shots that night. Later that night, Mike taking care of his bull. About an hour later, I shot a bull, another bull. So these calls work, and how to set up works. And but that's how to hunt peak of the rut. Now I want to talk about post rut. Like here in Idaho and other states, on public land, usually rifle season starts October 10th. I took a little girl, Wayne Carlton and I were working, it was like maybe 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. There was a little girl that sat in our booth the whole weekend. And I told her name was Alyssa. I said, "Alyssa," do you want to go on an elk hunt? She said, "Yeah." And they were homeless like the year before. I found out her life story. And I thought, I'm going to help this kid out. Mentoring, what Michelle brought up earlier. I'm going to help this kid out. And I said, "How would you like to go on an elk hunt?" And she said, "Sure." I said, "Well, if you can get it approved from your mom, you guys can stay at our house. I'll take you guys out." Well, long story short, she came out like a month prior. I took her out. We got an elk to bugle. I taught her how to bugle. She bugled at it. The bull answered back. I mean, how exciting that must have been for her. Fast forward rifle season. And I've called in so many bulls during rifle season, but you have to understand why they're coming into you. They're not coming into you because it's breeding season, even though there's still breeding season going on. They're coming into you because there's more human encroachment around here during the rifle season than any other time of year. They got quads and roads everywhere. And to me, the more people, the better. Because you want to know why? Elk are nervous. And elk are herd animals. I've killed too many bulls. Again, remember going out, me and my brother-in-law one year, we killed 2 bulls in 2 days with the technique I'm going to share with you. I took the game warden out when I lived down by Pierce, Idaho. I said, "John," "when do you get off?" He said, "Can you get off opening morning?" He said, "No, I got to work." So he said, "I can get off the second day though. So let's go." Called John in the bull using this technique I'm going to share with you right now. What I like to do, and Brad, this is the technique that you use right here. What I like to do, and the more people, the better on public land. I know there's elk in the area. I like to set up on a hillside. I don't care if the wind's going straight down, but I'm going to make sure I have a shooting lane that I'm going to see them before they catch my scent, or I'll be able to get a shot off. I don't care about the wind blowing straight at my back going downhill, because it normally is in the morning, right? Sun goes down, the wind goes down. Sun comes up, the wind comes up. Sun's still down in the morning. I know I'm going to have wind at my back. But I want to have timber off to each side, but I want to have a little clearing in between that I could get a good shot out to 300 yards, for instance. By the way, I've never shot an elk ever over 75 yards with a rifle. And this is the technique that I use right here. So I will sit there and I will make remember we talked about the different cow sounds, the short, choppy being anxiety sounds. I'm not doing that. I'm making these sounds relaxed. Everything's good. And by the way, how I use that diaphragm, and I want to just share this with you, I can make it sound like you're different elk. I'm gonna make the cow call. Now I'm going to close my lips down a little bit. I don't know if your speakers are picking that up or your mics are picking that up on your end.
Yeah,
But or you can maybe bring your mouth to an O, like oh, 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 oh. If you smile and hold that while you're doing a cow call, it'll sound like a calf. Listen, smile. But get to an O. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Smile, bring it to the O, and then close your lips. Now I'm making herd sounds. Elk are herd animals, everybody. If you have those bite and blow calls we talked about earlier, use those also. I want to make it sound, and Michelle, to answer your question again, how often do I call? Every 10 minutes. And then I shut up and I let those elk hunt for me. And I look at my watch and I will set my timer on my watch because otherwise I want to pick up these calls and I want to use them and don't. Don't shut up and let them hunt for you. There's a time to shut up and let them hunt for you. So, and I'm also using that external call. Number one, it gets way out there, a lot further than these diaphragms, but I'm doing these long, drawn out, everything's happy, everything's fine here, these long, drawn out calls. This is how it sounds. And then I shut up for 10 minutes. And I sit there and I wait. And that's how I hunt elk during the rifle season, especially on public land, muzzleloader or rifle where there's a lot of people. You will find that the elk, cows and bulls alike, work their way to you. And because it's still early season enough, like October 10th, the bulls are still hanging out with the cows because the cows didn't get bred in September. They come into a second heat in October. They stick with them for about a month. So I know those, because if you call in cows, which I do, there's typically going to be a bull with them. So that technique is extremely successful for me during rifle season. My favorite technique to use during rifle season. Now, when you get down in the southwestern part of the United States, up north, grass is everywhere. Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, the only rainforest in America, Oregon and Washington, going up and through Alaska, British Columbia and Alaska, even Northern California, it's all rainforest, especially on the west side of the Cascade Mountains. But still, even on the east side, it's still, there's grass everywhere. The further south you go, grass is down there, but water isn't abundant like we have here. You still have a lot of grass down there, but the elk are patterned off of water. Now, if you're going to go down to New Mexico to hunt, I'm going to tell you my favorite technique. New Mexico, Arizona, southern Utah, southern Colorado. My favorite technique to use is this on public land. Do your scouting, find the water tanks. Even though they call them water tanks, by the way, but they're still dirt holes. They're just like big ponds. But they call them tanks. I don't know where the word you expect to see a metal tank when they say tank, but they're just big. I know you guys have seen that before, but they're just big dirt holes, right? But I'm gonna say let me use the terminology that they use down there. But find these dirt tanks or find these water tanks, actual water tanks that they use. And what I do is I do my scouting. I find out early enough before I hunt where the bulls are at and the cows, and they're usually on that water in the morning. But before that sun starts coming up over the horizon, if you can kind of imagine this, those elk are moving off of that water and going to their bedding grounds. So what I like to do is I will take my GPS and I will actually, I won't make a sound. A lot of times those bulls are bugling on the way back to their bedding grounds. And I'm following the bulls and the cows. I'm following. And just when it gets light enough to shoot, I mark it on my GPS right here. Just mark whatever you want. Put hunt here on your GPS. Next morning rolls around. I go in the pitch black dark to that place right where it was getting light, and I know those elk are going to be here. And that's exactly what happens. If they're not harassed, they will use the same pattern. They're going to go right back to that. And I try to stay off to the side because you're going to be moving directly into the wind, because a lot of times that wind's coming down. They're going to be moving directly into the wind, and I'm going to stay back maybe 50, 60, even 80 yards. And when those elk are traveling back to their bedding grounds, the bull's typically always behind the cows. He's following them. So let the cows walk, let the cows walk, let the cows walk, let the cows walk. And then what happens is the bull's getting closer. That's when I sneak up and try to get within shooting distance, and I'll cow call to see how it reacts. Especially with that open reeded cow call. I remember one time I got this gal a shot at a 390 bull, and she shot right over his back. And a couple days later, I called her in a 386 bull. She killed it. But this we use the same exact technique I'm telling you about. And John McClendon was with Bob Fromm. They killed a 400 bull out of the same herd, like maybe 4 or 5 days earlier. But there was a couple of big bulls together, and she shot at this bull, and she just shot right over his back. But he answered. He came right in that cow call. And a lot of times, if they're not coming in that cow call, that's when you want to do your little squeal, your little followed up with a like that, with an open reeded cow call like that, and he's going to come in and kick your butt because he's got a little bull near his cows, and he's not going to have that. He's going to come in and kick your butt. So that's my favorite technique hunting off of water. I've never killed. I've had a lot of friends kill elk off of water tanks. I don't usually put my clients on water tanks unless they want. I like to go hunt them. I like to intercept them coming to the water at nighttime, and I like to get them coming off of the water. I like the excitement of hunting elk. I just like calling. I like hunting. But listen, some of the biggest bulls that have ever been shot have been shot off of water because they're susceptible. They've got to drink in order to live, and use that technique to your advantage. It's legal. In a lot of states, it's legal to do that, and go ahead and, by all means, take advantage of that technique. Like I said, there's more one way to skin a cat. Use the techniques. When you only have a week to go elk hunt somewhere and you got to make it happen any way you can. If you have your buddy sit up on the hill, get one answer while you cougar in and kill it, do it that way. There's no shame in any way that any big bull elk, trophy elk on the ground it's a trophy. I mean, it's not everybody gets an elk.
Right.
So anyway, that's pretty much my little seminar, you guys. And I didn't mean to cut you off. Ask any questions, but hopefully if you have any questions, just please ask.
Well, I don't know.
Wow, that was awesome.
Yeah,
I think you covered about everything.
Right? Yeah, I mean, we're just sitting here. I was just listening and picturing myself, out there with you, imagining, these scenarios, playing out in front of me. So that's probably, I feel like, why we were all quiet. I mean, there's moments where, especially some of the calls, Art closes his eyes and sighs because he misses it. We just love those sounds, right? But yeah, I think you covered it so nicely and shared so much, and both now and a little bit earlier when you were talking about different people, like the different people that give the seminars and that are sharing their knowledge, they all might say something different, right? And to me, even in my world, outside of hunting, and my nursing job, I refer to these as they're all just tools that you can put in your toolbox. There's no one right way, but there's different tools and you can pick and choose what makes sense for you and what is a strength for you. And then they're just all tools to put in your toolbox to pull out and use when the occasion is right.
Right. Yeah.
So if I get back out elk hunting again, one of these days, I'll never guide him again, but it's been so long, like I said, that if I kill one, I'm just going to refer to it on the TV show as I did it the Dieter way.
That's funny. We've been so blessed, like we talked about earlier, to know so many celebrities within this industry, right? And I know you don't look at yourself as one, and I know I don't look at myself as one, right? we're just so lucky to be able to work in the outdoor industry, right? And it's for a living. When I started winning with all these world elk hunting championships, then I started getting, offers to work in the hunting industry, and that's how I started working here. But I remember Rob Keck one time. Where I'm going with that is, being able to hunt with Rob Keck. He told me one time, and Wayne Carlton, I was with both of them. They both said, if you're a good turkey hunter, you'll be a great elk hunter.
Yeah.
So I want to give that analogy to, I know there's a lot more turkey hunters in Wisconsin than there are elk hunters, but I know there's a lot of turkey hunters that want to go elk hunting. So take the confidence in knowing what these two celebrities, my mentors, shared with me, and I believe it. I think if a turkey could smell you, you probably wouldn't kill one.
No.
But, you can fool their eyes with your camouflage. You can fool their ears. You've heard this old saying, you can fool their ears with the calls, but you're not going to fool their nose. You're just not. And they smell so many parts per million. And it's the same thing with a whitetail. Deer are so much more sensitive than an elk. Elk, they make noise. That deer, a lot of times, especially heavily hunted areas, they'll jump out of their own skin if a leaf jumps and if a leaf falls beside them, right? But elk aren't that skittish. You can get away with a lot more. You can't get away with a lot, but you can get away with a lot more with elk than you can with deer.
Yeah,
So.
it's you say that, and it's kind of funny because I had pretty much the same conversation with Rob Keck when I was blessed to hunt with him here in Southwest Wisconsin. We hunted turkeys together one spring, and we were talking about elk and stuff, and he says there's a lot of similarities, between the two. He says, but like you just said, he said one of the biggest differences is, he said, if a turkey could smell, he says, we wouldn't kill him. He says, that's why they made it so they can't smell. But he says, that is why we get to kill elk. He said, because we
and turkeys.
Yeah, he said, we can get around the smell with them. He said, but I don't know if we'd be able to figure that out with turkeys. So, it's he was a lot of fun. And right now I'm actually working on some things to hopefully one of my, I've been blessed like you, and for me, it's all about helping other people and people becoming successful. And, I do so much turkey hunting and I don't charge anymore for taking people turkey hunting. I just basically take, some youth, special needs, family, friends, and that's it anymore. And I still take quite a few. I took 13 this year and we killed 13 birds.
That's awesome.
But I've been talking to the NWTF, and actually, if things work out, which I should know here, probably, I'm guessing within the next month, I will be speaking at the NWTF convention down in Nashville next year, which
nice.
To me is kind of cool, looking at
that.
Yeah,
it's an honor.
It
is.
A
huge honor.
With growing up with all those people, again, like you and Wayne, but myself, I could sit here and throw Eddie Salter, Chris Parrish, Matt Moret, Will Primos, all these guys, Rick White, there's a ton of them. And, I've had a lot of them on the podcast. We're all friends. Which,
and I am as well with those guys.
Right, which is absolutely, is crazy because you look, like you said, you look at them as celebrities. I look at Dieter, I'm like, hey, Dieter he's an elk god, and he guided, he was a, TV show host, and you did all these things too. And, but I think, and maybe it is the Southwest Wisconsin thing. I don't look at myself as a celebrity. I know you don't either. We get up in the morning, we put our pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else.
Anybody who's ever wanted my phone number, and I know a lot of guys that I'm not going to name names, but I know a lot of people that are in our position that would never give out their phone number.
No.
I give it out a lot, and I'll sit there even when I'm elk hunting. like even last year, I probably had at least a dozen people contacting me through via. A lot of times I can't talk, but I'll help them. They're in a situation, a hunting situation. They might have a question.
What do I do?
And I'm more than happy to help them.
Yeah.
My door is open, just like being back home. My door is open for knowledge. If I can help somebody get their first elk or 15th elk, if I can help them in some way, maybe it'll be my ticket into heaven. Who knows?
Well,
I don't know.
I think celebrity or not, it's a good thing that you and Art and others maybe are like this, like next generation or wave of mentors and teachers as we start to lose some of those, some of the folks in that first group of names that we all, know and have mentioned some, that there's other people here, yourselves included, that can kind of, pick up the torch and carry the torch to get more people and maintain people in our hunting sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I share that with people like Bo Brooks is running around. Bo's won 2 World Elk Calling Championships. And, first thing I told Bo, and by the way, I went to this kid, by the way, his dad shot the new world record elk this last year.
Yep.
But I've known Bo since the day he was born. When Don had him, we went to the hospital to go visit them. Casey was at my wedding and I was at Casey's wedding back in the day. Anyway, it's a small world, and it just happens to be those guys turned out to be outstanding elk hunters, especially Casey. Casey's truly one of the best elk hunters I've ever hunted with. And the number one thing I think that I tell Casey, what kills elk for you, Casey? Tenacity. You never give up. And I could tell a couple stories of hunting with Casey where nobody was killing elk, and he would go in there and kill an elk. Even though it was a little raghorn, it could have been a 400 bull. He was just as excited with that. And he's gotten, I think, 13, 14, 400 elk by now at this point. Some of these are on public land. Some are, on private. Some are on, but he's a really good elk hunter. And Bo is following in his dad's footsteps, won 2 World Elk Calling Championships. And of course, I've known him forever, and I feel like I can give him some advice and just tell him to stay humble and always help people. And he is that. He is that already because of his dad and his mom, and because of hopefully people like me. He's just very respectful. And he's the next generation, like you're talking about, Michelle, in the elk woods out west. He is the next generation, and he's a good kid.
Nice.
So,
Brad, did you have any?
Anyway.
Brad, since you've got an elk hunt kind of like in the works or thinking on, and is there anything that you have questions on or need any more information? Or do you think Dieter covered it all pretty good for you?
I think he covered it all. That I absorbed a lot of information from this podcast. It was just amazing.
Thank you, guys. It means a lot to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
I can't wait to get out there now.
Right? I know. I'm like, we don't have any elk hunts planned. Like, what can we do about that?
Yeah.
So thanks so much, Dieter. I think for joining us today and really being so forthcoming with information and sharing some of your techniques, maybe most of your techniques. I mean, I just didn't get the feeling like you were keeping any secrets back, but you really shared so much information. And thank you for sharing that with our listeners today.
Oh, you're welcome. And I just hope, people, they can do their scouting. I just want to recap. Do your scouting at your living room before you leave. Find good bull to cow ratios. Focus on northeast facing slopes if possible with headwater drainages, like where the creeks are starting out of the side of the mountainsides. Focus on that. Focus on areas you can get into. If you don't have time to do this, and if you can afford it, you might want to consider going with a guide. Problem with drop camps is if there's not an elk in the area, you're stuck there on a drop camp type of a situation. That's if you don't know what a drop camp it is, or you hire an outfitter, they'll pack you in. They'll put up a wall tent. You get your own food, all of that stuff, and you're out on your own. But if there's no elk in the area, you're kind of screwed. And I know down in central Idaho right now, I mean, the elk numbers are way down. You might be dropped off into a drainage where the wolves have gone through there, and you might not see an elk track. I'm being honest with you. And there's places that I've elk hunt just south of here. I haven't seen an elk track in trails that I've seen. They were like cattle trails, and you just don't see the elk tracks anymore. So you really got to put in your time to scout, especially in wolf country where there's a lot of wolves. And we could talk about the wolves on another podcast, but early season, I taught you techniques how to hunt elk early season. I taught you how to hunt elk during the peak of the rut, a couple of techniques, and then postseason, what to do. And there's nothing wrong if you get into an area, Brad, where let's say it's November, December, where you're just going to have to find some fresh tracks and just track them and go after them. Make sure you got a good GPS and you don't get. I'm telling anybody that steps in the woods out west, make sure you can start a fire. If you can start a fire and you get lost, you will live. If you cannot start a fire, you will die. You can die. If that's my public address announcement for the evening or day here, make sure you have good fire starting equipment. And there's times I'm telling you that I've gotten hypothermic up there, and you're 12 miles from the truck, and you're soaking wet, and you're just shivering, and uncontrollably, and it's time just stop elk hunting, set up a darn fire, get dried out, get your clothes dried out. There's no shame in that, staying alive. It's really, really important to be able to start a fire.
Well,
more than anything.
Yeah.
But thanks, you guys. I know we've been talking about doing this for a long time. I just want to thank you both for having me on. I know elk hunting isn't at the top of everybody's list, but if anybody's ever interested, it is exciting. You smell those bulls when you get downwind of them. Oh, I mean, that smell, the rankness, you'll smell them a lot of times before you see them. And it's pretty darn exciting. So, yeah, really encourage people to get out there and go on an elk hunt. And you don't have to go with an outfitter. You can do this on your own. You can just use those techniques that I showed you, especially trying to find elk in each state, and put in for special draw tags. Somebody's going to draw it. And it's easier than drawing the lottery. You'll draw a tag at some point, but put in for Arizona, New Mexico, Idaho, Utah, especially Utah. It's a sleeper state for elk. Those areas like that. On anything, if you ever want to relay them back to Art and Michelle and Brad, you guys can. I don't know if you can keep me connected with those people, but yeah,
of course,
you can give them my, Facebook. Just look me up on Facebook Messenger or whatever, and just shoot me a message, and I'll try to help who's ever listening if they have any questions.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Take some of these tips from Dieter and own the season.
Follow Own the Season Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for listening.
Check back weekly for new episodes.